My name is Dr. Ian Storch. I'm a board-certified gastroenterologist and osteopathic physician, and you are listening to DO or Do Not. If you are interested in joining our team or have suggestions or comments, please contact us at doordonotpodcast.com. Share our link with your friends and like us on Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Today, we interview Dr. Tyree Winters, DO, who is currently serving as the Pediatric Residency Associate Program Director and third-year Pediatric Clerkship Director at the Goryeb Children's Hospital. He also is part of clinical faculty at Rowan University. As if that was not enough, he also serves as medical director at a clinic which offers care for medically underserved children. His interests and passions include working within his community and advocating for children's health, so much so that he has gained himself the title of the hip-hop doc. We hope you enjoy learning about Dr. Winters' path to pediatrics and why we chose to spotlight him during this special month. Hello, everyone. This is Amir Kibani, third-year medical student from the Alabama College of Osteopathic Medicine. I hope everyone out there is staying safe, and on behalf of the DO or Do Not team, thank you for tuning in today. I'd like to introduce our special guest today, Dr. Tyree Winters, DO, aka the Hip Hop Doc. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Thanks for asking.
So, thank you so much for being on our podcast and taking a Saturday to answer a few questions for our pre-medical students.
Well, I appreciate, again, the opportunity to be able to even come and talk. So I definitely appreciate this.
So our first question for you, we usually start with kind of letting the pre-medical students and medical students that listen to our podcast kind of see into your day, what your normal day looks like. Walk us through your day from the morning when you wake up, eat a bowl of cereal, and kind of, what your roles and responsibilities are throughout the day.
Yeah, so I actually have technically 4 roles that I go through for the day. So initially I wake up around 7 a.m., I would say, hopefully, and I get ready to go in. I have 4 roles. The 4 roles that I have is the Associate Program Director for the Pediatric Residency Program at Goryeb Children's Hospital in Morristown, New Jersey. I also am the third-year Medical Student Clerkship Director for the Pediatrics rotation for Thomas Jefferson, Rowan University, as well as for St. George's University here at Goryeb. And then I am also the medical director for the Pediatric Health Start Clinic, which is the resident continuity clinic. So out of those 3 roles, in addition to having private patients that I see as well, my day is very dynamic. I will usually have half of the day that I will spend with seeing patients directly in either my private practice or the Pediatric Health Start Clinic. And then I will also have a half a day where I will either be teaching learners, whether that's medical students or residents, or I will be doing administrative work, whether that's doing meetings for operations of the clinic, or either trying to come up with curriculum or trying to come up with any type of resident or student issues that may occur.
Awesome. So what time does your day typically end?
So I usually can leave out the office at about 5:30, 6 p.m. For the most part, Monday through Thursdays. Fridays, I try to leave out a little bit earlier, but most likely I'll still get out of there at about roughly 5 o'clock.
That's awesome. So I did introduce you with your nickname, the Hip Hop Doc. I really would love for you to tell us about your story about how you received that nickname.
Yeah. So, part of my background and training, so I did my residency at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. And after I completed my general pediatric residency, I wound up coming back to Nationwide Children's after a year and a half of private practice. And I did additional training in pediatric weight management. During that time period, I had the opportunity to be able to lead a primary care obesity network, which consisted of about 11 practices in the Nationwide Children's close to home outpatient care centers, and it was focused in on pediatric obesity management. And I would do about roughly 3 sessions, which is half a day of seeing just pediatric patients who suffer from obesity. And as I was going through and talking with them, a lot of the patients that I encountered were not only from medically underserved or from high at risk populations, but they were also patients who looked like me. They came from underrepresented minority communities. And one of the barriers that was present was the lack of resources that were available to be able to do physical activity, whether that was not being able to afford to participate in some of the community centers like the YMCA or the Boys and Girls Club, but even just having access to be able to go outside and just be active. So, being in Ohio, I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. I can tell you, you have 4 good months of being able to be active outside. Outside of that is either too cold or it gets dark too quickly. And so a lot of these patients, they would live in homes that would actually be maybe shared wall space or would be tighter dwelling units. So apartments that may not be that big, or they may have people underneath them, or they may be in trolley park homes. And so they weren't able to do physical activity or be able to move around quite a bit. One of the things that I know for sure is my experience in dance. I have been always able to use dance as a way of being able to not only do an activity that I enjoy and love, but also I saw weight loss during that process as well. So during my time in my fraternity in college, when I was on the step team, I was able to do step practice and I would find myself losing weight at that time. Or when I was also at my current role, at my role in Nationwide Children's, I actually did some hip hop dance classes around the city. And it was a way for me to be able to stay in shape. So I thought to myself, like, why not bring that to the patients that I was seeing at Nationwide Children's? So that's exactly what I did. I actually asked my boss, who was the division chair of primary care pediatrics, if I could use the waiting room area to be able to have free dance classes for patients. And it was kind of a twofold method. One is that it was allowing my patients to be able to have the opportunity to be able to have free access to a resource in terms of with dance, but it was also a way to be able to ensure that if patients were able to receive this resource, they would have to come to their appointments. And so they couldn't miss their appointments, which a lot of times you would have a high no-show rate when you do pediatric weight management. So I was able to do both things. And I started it off in the outpatient care clinic in the waiting room. I had about 10 families that show up. So it was roughly about 30 people total. And from that point, it continued to grow. Every other week, I would have a dance class. And then I realized, like, man, I'm running out of space. So then I partnered with the YMCA. The local YMCA said, hey, I tell you what, if you actually bring this to the YMCA, you can have the space for free. Your patients can actually come and then be able to enjoy like the rest of the day at the YMCA after the class was over, as long as you allow for our members to be able to come in and participate for free. So it was a win-win situation. How the moniker Dr. Ty Hip Hop that came about was I actually I became a spokesperson with the AOA through the DOs That Care campaign back in 2015. And during that time period, I was able to kind of meet with the AOA's branding team, with the public relations team, and we wind up talking, and they just asked me questions about, what were my interests, what things that I did. And so I was telling them about, just the hip hop class that I offered. It was not meant to be anything that was supposed to be publicized or put out there and mass public acknowledgement. And they heard that and it was like, this is a awesome thing that you're doing. Can you bring this to OMED? And so I remember in 2017, OMED was in Philadelphia. I was able to, in the middle of the exhibit hall, be able to perform as Dr. Ty Hip Hop Doc and show what I did with my patients. And so I was so proud of myself because I said, if I want to do this, I want to be truly authentic to myself and truly authentic to my culture. And I got a chance to play French Montana, Pop That, in the middle of OMED.
Yes.
So many people just stopped. And by the time I had finished with the first song, and I did 2 songs, everyone in the exhibit hall, and I turned it up to the loudest I possibly could, everyone in the exhibit hall was dancing along with me. And it got put on YouTube. And when it got put on YouTube, it got over 30,000 likes. And so what grew was Dr. Ty Hip Hop Doc.
That is just awesome. That really is. You really are the epitome of why people like me want to be physicians. That's just amazing.
God. That was so amazing. Thank you for saying that. I'm truly humbled.
No, really. Just you being a DO and me going into DO school, it's because of you and the many doctors I've met. That's amazing. And I hope pre-med students listen to this and see that as well. You did bring up a great point that, I've never really taken that into account, that in Detroit and cities like what you were mentioning, that, you have to take into account months that people can't go outside. That's really interesting.
Most definitely. I mean, even now in New Jersey, where I'm at, I'm right outside the city of New York. And I can tell you that it is freezing right now. I also have become a avid runner. And, with the pandemic, when you think about COVID, it's limiting so many different things we can do. I haven't been back to the gym since March. And even with thinking about okay, after I've taken the vaccine, then maybe I can go back to the gym. Well, you need to still wear a mask, and wearing a mask while you're doing physical activity is quite hard, right? So it's hard, and you have to be able to figure out ways. And that's the beauty about being not only a physician, but also being a DO is this is not new to us in terms of being able to find solutions to problems that exist. This is the epitome of what A.T. Steele thought about when you were to think about OMM even, right? So OMM was never meant to be something that was, you have to do it in this specific way. That's the reason why, as you continue to keep practicing, we find that we can change the way that we do certain therapies based off of how we need to modify it. And this is the crux of who we are as a profession.
We're adaptable. That's what it is.
Very much so.
So going along with, the story that you told about dancing and everything, first off, you're lucky that this is on video. I would have made you bust out some steps.
You can look on look on social media for those.
The one thing that really inspired me from reading articles and listening to some of your interviews is you talking about 16-year-old Dr. Tyree Winters. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so at 16 years old, I unfortunately was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I was one of the children who were in adolescence that developed type 2. So we talk a lot about seeing children who are developing chronic illnesses that typically you would see in an older adult or a middle-aged adult. And so that changed my life forevermore. I was fortunate enough to be able to have a family, parents who understood the disease process, who was able to provide me with not only with guidance on how to maintain a healthier lifestyle, but also being able to just continue to encourage me to want to live this lifestyle. But it was quite scary. I was just graduated from high school. I graduated a year early from high school and started at college at University of Michigan, Dearborn. And at that time, when I was diagnosed, I was afraid. I was afraid I was going to die. Even though my father had diabetes, even though I had known family members who had diabetes, I still just felt like I was going to die. And it's really a hard thing when you are 16. One of the things that a lot of people when you talk about just obesity and you talk about some of the chronic illnesses that can be associated with obesity, we do a lot of victim blaming. We do a lot of blaming on individuals for disease processes that we know can also have not only a lifestyle component, but also can have a hereditary component. It can also have different biological pathways and markers that can lead to this. And so it was interesting. If you have a patient that is a type 1 diabetic, a lot of people will say like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, this is such a hard situation for you, and I really feel bad for you. If you have a child that have type 2 diabetes, a lot of times it's like, well, you shouldn't have been lazy. You should have been working out more. You shouldn't have been eating this. You shouldn't have been eating that. We do that to adults as well. And that was one of the things that I noticed along my journey. And so I really wanted to stress to myself as well as stress to others how I can make a change. I can definitely make changes to my lifestyle, but that also it's okay to understand, like, this is not all on you. This is not all of your fault. Situations happen. And just like the same way where you have situations where someone may have like type 1 diabetes or may have a cancer diagnosis, you fight through this and you can be a fighter. There's things that you can do to be able to help yourself. And there's things that we can do to be able to help you as well. And just partnering with your healthcare providers. So that was very important to me. And as I was going along through my medical education and going along through my training, it was something that I really focused on and something that it really became a personal mission to me. But the thing that I noticed is that it's hard, right? When we're going through medical training, you know this, you are clearly studying at Alabama College of Osteopathic Medicine. You know how you got tests that come up and sometimes we tend to lean towards not being able to do as much physical activity as we would like, or, it's quite easy to grab something quick along the way that may not be the most healthiest item to eat. And so I suffered from that. Especially towards the end of my residency. So towards the end of my residency, I was at the largest that I ever was. And so I wound up going to see my doctor at the time, and I wound up seeing that my hemoglobin A1C was creeping up, and I was noticing even a little bit of protein in my urine, which scared me totally, because I understand that kidney disease is associated with diabetes, as well as being African American. It's also associated with having worse outcomes in certain populations. And so that's when I decided, like, okay, I have to make a change because I have to live. I didn't go through all this training to then finish, and now I can't even enjoy or help anyone because I can't even take care of myself. And so that's when I had made a lot of lifestyle changes, and I was able to actually lose about 70 pounds from that, and still been fighting ever since to keep at a healthier weight.
You make it look so easy, but you know what? I can't even imagine the constant fights and battles that you have to go through. And I'm glad that, 16-year-old you had your family and that support, because, not many people have that.
I agree. I so agree.
So you mentioned your education, your undergraduate education, as well as your medical school education. Could you discuss a little bit about where you went, as well as how you really became interested in medicine? Did your childhood have a part of it? Did you have anyone in your family that was a physician, a DO physician for that matter? And just ultimately, how did you decide to want to be a doctor?
Yeah, so ever since I was 5 years old, I always wanted to be a physician. I was fortunate enough growing up in Detroit. When I usually say I grew up in Detroit, a lot of times people, and I've had this happen before, believe it or not, where I've had a attending physician when I was in training that when we were just kind of talking and passing between patients, and she said, "Oh, where did you grow up?" And I said, "I grew up in Detroit." And she said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. It must have been so hard for you." And I said, actually, it wasn't that hard at all for me because I enjoyed it. I mean, the thing that most people don't realize about the city of Detroit is that it's so much more than what the news and what mainstream media may portray. It's way much more than just 8 Mile, as people like to think about when they think about, Eminem. And like I tell people all the time, 8 Mile literally is the road that divides the city of Detroit from the northern suburbs of Detroit. And it has way more of a connotation, which we can have dissertations about that. But anyway, but because of that, growing up in the city of Detroit, the beautiful thing is that I got a chance to experience so many different stratifications of the African American diaspora. So I grew up in a family where my parents went to college. I've had great uncles, great aunts. I've even had a great grandmother who was one of the first Black midwives that was in the state of Mississippi. So this is my family history, and it's not a weird family history for me either. For most people, when they hear an African American person say that they are a second or third generation college graduate, they may say like, "Wow, that's weird." But most of the people I grew up around or I went to school with they were second generation or third generations. And the thing about it is that right around like 2000, Detroit had the most Black CEOs that was anywhere in the country. So we have so many great things about the city of Detroit. It's just not the gun violence and gang activity and the ruin porn that everyone wants to show.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I had a phenomenal Black female pediatrician who was an MD. She went to Howard University, and actually, funny thing is that she graduated 50 years, almost to the date, minus 5 days. We would have graduated 50 years to the date from each other. But phenomenal Black female pediatrician. And she was my role model, and I wanted to be just like her. I loved everything about her. She was just the sweetest person ever. And she always was just so revered, highly revered in my family. And so I just wanted that. I always wanted to help people. I always wanted to take care of children. I was one of those kids that when I saw a baby or when I was even older, I would take my nieces with me someplace. Or I would take my little brother with me someplace because I just always loved just hanging out with kids. And so that was kind of where I started that drive of wanting to go in and my example. Fast forward a little bit more, I had the opportunity and experience to be able to go to Cass Tech High School, which is a magnet high school. And at that high school, I had the privilege of being able to do college preparatory courses where I also had a chance to be able to do an internship in a pharmacy and become a pharmacy tech and certify as a pharmacy tech. And so that kind of made me think, well, maybe could pharmacy be an option? Right around the time that I was diagnosed with diabetes, I wound up switching providers because I was older at this point in time and I didn't feel like I needed to have a pediatrician anymore. And so my new provider was a DO, Dr. Robert Orr, and another Black male physician. And I remember just asking my mom when I was looking it up because my mom gave me the book of providers that was under our plan. And she was just like, okay, well, it's time to pick a new physician then. And as I'm going through the book, I remember asking her, I was like, Mom, what does DO mean? And so she was like, oh, it's just another word for doctor. And so I was like, okay. She really didn't have the most solid understanding either. She'll admit to that. Or
At least she knew it was a doctor, though.
Exactly. But the great thing about growing up in Michigan is there are so many DOs that it's just like you go on any corner and it's like MDDO, MDDO. It's just like it just seems synonymous. And so I got a chance. Dr. Orr became my doctor. He was the one who actually diagnosed me with diabetes and guided me through. And then I started undergrad. I wound up going to, like I said, University of Michigan, Dearborn. And during that time, I had applied. I got accepted to University of Michigan's pharmacy school. I was starting pharmacy school, and my cousin, who was starting at Michigan State MD school, was starting the same time I was starting pharmacy school. And we had a conversation. I remember saying to myself, like, and I told her, I was like, I'm really jealous of you. And she was like, why? And I was like, because you're starting medical school and I'm not. And so she said, well, why can't you go to medical school? I was like, well, I don't know why I can't. So after that, I remember going to see Dr. Orr, and I said, hey, Dr. Orr, he knew that I had got accepted to pharmacy school, and he was very happy about it. And so I remember telling him, like, I don't think I want to do pharmacy anymore. I think I want to go to medical school. And so the first thing out of his mouth was, well, I could have told you that. I could have told you you were supposed to be a physician. But, I was going to let you do your thing. I wasn't going to. And so then I was like, well, do you have any advice, any tips of what I should do? And where did you go to medical school? And so he told me he went to Des Moines College of Osteopathic Medicine. And he said, but I would strongly encourage you to apply to Ohio University. And when he said Ohio University, I was like, you mean Ohio State? And he was like, no, Ohio University. And I was like, wow, I never heard of Ohio University. Believe it or not, even though I'm in the next state over. And so he said, I tell you, they have a great dean who I know. And at the time, that great dean was Dr. Barbara Ross Lee.
Oh,
right.
We just interviewed her.
Exactly. I know you did. That's why I had to throw that in there.
There you go.
He was really good friends with her. She's obviously a Detroit native and a Cass Tech alum as well. And so he worked with her. She lived actually right down the street from me when she was still in Michigan practicing. But I didn't know who she was at the time. And he had said, they're a great dean. They have a great program. They really strive for diversity. And I really think it will be a great school for you to apply to. That is the only reason why I initially applied to Ohio University. Then I got a chance because I was dead set. I was like, well, I'll go to Michigan State like my cousin. And I, applied, did everything. And I remember when I was going through the application process, I wound up calling Ohio University. And I just remember just like sending an email like that night. And this is before, everybody had your personal computers and you were checking your email. I was checking my email in the computer lab. This was, mind you, like 2001, so early 2000. And sent an email just like, hey, how are you? I'm thinking about applying to your medical school. Well, the next morning when I got back to campus, I wound up having 3 emails back from Ohio University. And at that point in time, it was from the director of admissions, the director of their Center of Excellence in Multicultural Medicine, as well as the coordinator for that center. At that moment, Ohio University became my number one choice because I was like, wow, I've never got a response back like that before.
They really wanted you.
Oh my gosh. And so lo and behold, I studied for my MCAT literally 28 days before I took my MCAT. Because I remember I was leaving pharmacy school in the middle of everything and just hurried up and took my MCAT. Didn't do the best.
Days. I could believe that. Did you pass though?
Well, I mean, I did well enough to be able to be offered an interview at Ohio University.
You passed. Okay.
Yeah. And so I got offered the interview. I actually got offered to do the summer program, which was the Summer Scholars Program. And that was the start of my career at Ohio University. And I just remember when I interviewed with them and Dr. John Schreiner, who was at the time the director of admission, now he's one of the deans. I remember him personally telling me that, I always look when I'm thinking about candidates for medical school, if I wanted this person to take care of me or my family. And he said, when I look at you, I can tell I want you to take care of my children. Wow. And that is the highest compliment I think that anyone can give you. And I did the postbac program the next year, and that literally 5 weeks later, I did start at the postbac program, and I started the med school started med school the year afterwards, and I loved every minute of it.
That's amazing. That is the biggest compliment during your interview, just to receive that compliment.
I
Wow.
know.
So you went from doing the post-bac, and is that post-bac just a kind of like a stepping stone straight into medical school? Or you could start medical school right when you finished, and if you pass, or does that kind of guarantee you another interview? How does that work?
So at the time, this was back in 2002, the Summer Scholars Program was a summer program that was for underrepresented minority candidates, as well as some legacy. And so legacy meaning that you would have a family member that was an osteopathic physician, as well as if you were from Appalachia, because Ohio University is right in the middle of the beginning parts of the Appalachian Mountains. Mm-hmm. And so it was limited to 25 people. You would do 6 weeks worth of your of a sample of like your first year courses. It's very intense. I mean, you're in class from literally from 8 a.m. to like 6 p.m. some days, go home and study, go to the dorms and study, go right back the next day. You would have so many different exams. I mean, it was presentations. It was 6 weeks of pure, just unadulterated, just work. And I loved every minute of it, though. It was really informative. It really allowed you to have an opportunity just to show if you took barriers away of not having to go to work or not having to worry about, how am I going to afford to pay for housing or how I'm going to be able to pay for food, because they covered your housing, your food, as well as the tuition. And so afterwards, after I finished that, then you automatically will receive an interview. I did the interview, and after I had completed the interview, you are given certain options. So you would have to, if you're thinking about doing, if postbac was an option for you, it would have to be it would only be offered to someone who had applied, who met the qualifications to be able to get an interview. And then if they saw maybe, we really think that you have a great potential as a candidate into the medical school, but you may need some additional work, either in taking a couple of more upper level science courses or just a little bit more preparation before you start off in medical school, then you could do the program. The beauty of that program is that your tuition is covered. So I didn't have to pay tuition for it. I just had to pay room and board, which was a huge financial burden lifted off of me.
Definitely.
And then as long as you maintained a 3.0 GPA, you were automatically matriculate into the medical school. So it's kind of like a way that I usually explain to people, it was like extending my medical school for 5 years instead of 4 years. And it was such a huge blessing for me. I was a psychology major, sociology minor. And like I said, I did obviously my science classes to be able to start pharmacy school and do pharmacy school, but I didn't do as many upper-level science courses, and I realized that I really needed to have a better background, especially in like my biological sciences. So taking courses like biochemistry again, and taking even courses like immunology, and those things were so helpful. So by the time that I literally started medical school, truthfully, I will not be, I will not lie to you. Medical school was quite a breeze for me because the Summer Scholars and Postbac program prepared me so well. And I was taking pretty much the courses that I did that I just kind of floated through those first 2 years.
I'm glad you spoke on the post-bac program, because most pre-medical students, at least, when I was a pre-med, I didn't even know that there was post-bac programs in medical schools and that was even an option. And when I did find that it was an option, I didn't really think about it the way you just said it. So I'm glad you spoke on that. And I actually did a master's / post-bac program before I went to med school. And
Oh, wow.
I agree with you. It's the best thing that's ever happened.
Yeah.
It makes your life easier.
It does. And I think the thing is that obviously your goal is, if your goal is to go to medical school, your goal is to go to medical school. But sometimes for certain individuals, it may be beneficial and helpful. I always say that, when someone asks me whether or not a gap year or a post-bac year or even post-bac 2 years is helpful, I do agree that it is. I think that you have to be careful at times. And I will always say that you have to realize that, there is a certain limit, an aggregate to the amount of loans that you can take out before you may have to take out additional loans. And loans are just that. You have to pay them back. So I
Mhm.
would always I would always tell people, like, just be careful about certain things, but post-bac programs, especially that are geared towards things like guaranteed admittance, if you meet certain condition or conditional admittance, I should say, are so invaluable. And it allows for you to be able to not only get a deeper understanding of the material, because that's what it's all about, right? It's not about a grade. It's about really being able to master that material so then you can build upon it when you're starting to learn other biomedical sciences and when you're starting to understand disease processes and treatment plans. If you don't have that foundation, there's no way in the world that you'll be able to understand when we start to talk about, the treatment of diabetes or, the pathophysiology behind it.
You're 100% right. So now, when we already talked about how you got into medical school. So now you're in medical school. How can you describe your experience at medical school? Did you do some extracurriculars? Did you do any research? And, the most important question that everyone wants to, hear about is, did you take the USMLE or not?
So, those are great questions. To answer two of those questions, and I've always been a social butterfly. So, I was
You know
quite,
it.
I know, right? Uh, I did quite a bit of extracurricular activities when I was in medical school. So I was actually the first DO to be named as the Region 5 director for the Student National Medical Association. Region 5 consists of the states of Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. So I was able to be on the national board for that organization, which is a student-ran organization. So it's great to be able to say that, hey, I'm on the board of this multi-million-dollar organization.
Sorry to interrupt, but for
Yeah,
the pre-medical students, could you describe what, because you're describing SNMA, what
yes.
SNMA is for, like what was it for and what it stands for?
Oh, yes. SNMA is Student National Medical Association. It is started back in 1964, if I'm not mistaken, or 67. Oh, gosh, I want to get in trouble. But the Student National Medical Association is actually initially branched off from the National Medical Association. This was the medical association that was primarily for Black African American physicians that were not allowed access into membership at the American Medical Association. And that was quite important because at the time, back when the National Medical Association was started in the early 1900s, if you were not a part of the American Medical Association, you could not sit as a practicing physician in a hospital. You were not granted privileges. And so the National Medical Association was helpful because you needed to be a member of an association to be able to have credentials at a hospital. Well, the Student National Medical Association started off with the mission of being able to diversify as well as to provide resources for minority medical students that are going on to physicians. It is well over 2,000 or actually 5,000 members strong. It is student ran totally, so it is not a part of the National Medical Association, although we have a strong affiliation with it. And then the other important part of this is it provides so many different resources to not only medical students, but also undergraduate and high school students to be able to learn how to matriculate into medical school. And so this once you actually get a chance to be exposed to it, you will realize how many different programming that are available. The national conferences are a way for minority candidates as well as residency programs to be able to engage with each other. And I cannot tell you how invaluable it is for recruitment season, especially now sitting as a program director, to be able to connect with students from the Student National Medical Association. So huge organization, and to be part of the leadership, especially as an osteopathic physician, or osteopathic medical student at the time, remember there weren't a whole heck of a lot of osteopathic medical schools, especially back in the 60s. So to start to see at the time that I was in leadership in the mid 2000s, that was when we had our first chair of the board that was an osteopathic physician and the first pre-medical board member, and so many different leaderships that we started seeing DO students becoming a part of, especially in the Student National Medical Association. So it was a huge thing for me. But in addition to that, I wound up being active in so many other different student organizations, as well as I did research in geriatrics, believe it or not, and I'm a pediatrician. But research is research. And so also the question that you asked for me was, did I take the USMLE or did I take COMLEX? So I was very fortunate enough to have a brilliant mentor, who I still consider to be my mentor, Dr. Jay Shubrick, who's now out in California. But I remember he said something to me that was so profound, and I really held on to it. And he said, Ty, if they don't want to take your boards, they don't want your degree. So why are you trying to do their boards? And I thought to myself, like, that's so true. I don't have to take the USMLE. I just have to take the COMLEX. It's what's required for my school. And it's part of my profession. That's what I need. I don't need the USMLE. So I was very set against it personally. It's not to say that I haven't had some of my friends who took the USMLE, especially if they were interested in certain residency programs that traditionally have been more quote unquote competitive or more of the good old MD system. However, as the single accreditation has occurred with ACGME, I am a huge proponent of pushing for all programs to accept COMLEX, because it's not difficult to be able to understand our boards or to be able to compare our boards with USMLE scores. And I just don't feel as if we need to place a emphasis on our students to have to pay not only extra money, but also have to deal with extra hoops to jump over. The time of trying to prove that we are just as good as or equal to our MD counterparts is over. So that's my stance on it.
I agree with you. We're equals. We're both doctors, physicians.
Exactly.
We work side by side with one another. And once we work, side by side and our patients see us side by side together, they can't really tell the difference. They just see the letters behind our name.
Yep.
So just speaking on after you take the USMLE and you're done with med school now, how was your application process to residency? And once in residency, how was your residency? Did you encounter any obstacles as an osteopathic resident or anything like that?
So great question. So after I took the COMLEX and it was time for me to make a decision of where to go, I had a unique situation. So it's part of Ohio University. We're one of the few public osteopathic medical schools. I also signed a contract that stated that I would either stay in the state of Ohio for 5 years after I finished, because our tuition was subsidized by the state of Ohio residents as part of a public institution, or I could satisfy that contract requirement if I was to do a residency program that was in primary care and also was part of the Ohio University core, or Center of Osteopathic Research Education. consortium. And so at the time for pediatrics, there was only one program. That one program was the duly accredited at the time. This is back in 2006, 2007. There's only one program in Ohio at the time that also had the AOA as well as the ACGME accreditation. That program was Nationwide Children's Hospital, Doctors Hospital West joint program. And so I was looking at all different possibilities and options. I'm originally, like I said before, from Detroit, and I always, when you were to ask me where would I want to work, I always thought that I would work at Children's Hospital Michigan, which is in downtown Detroit, because that was the pinnacle at the time when I was growing up of children's hospitals that you went to. If you got sick, if you were really sick, you always went to Children's. So I thought, okay, that's where I wanted to go to work. And I also wanted to just kind of branch out and see what other programs were available. And after I had got my scores back, I started sending out applications. And it's funny now that I say it, I look at some of the candidates now when they're applying to how many programs. I'm like, wow. I applied to 20 programs and I got 15 interviews. The funny thing is that the only place that I did not get an interview from, and they said it was because I did not take the USMLE, was actually Seattle Children's, University of Washington's program. But otherwise, I got interviews at not only at Nationwide Children's, but also at Johns Hopkins. I got interviews at Miami Children's, at Riley Children's in Indiana, all over the place. I wound up getting interviews. And so I was thinking to myself, like, well, like, again, if you don't want my board, you don't want my degree. So why am I even talking to you if that's the case? Got a chance to go and interview, and it was quite interesting. Being a Black male DO in pediatrics is like being a triple minority. You are you are a unicorn of unicorns.
Oh, wow.
It is not a whole heck of a lot of us out there. And so it was quite interesting to be out there on the interview trail. I remember just kind of every time I would go to an interview, and say, for instance, there were other candidates that were interviewing from different programs. Like, so sometimes you'll be in a group of, this is obviously way pre-COVID, you'll be in a group of candidates. And so if you're interviewing for X hospital, they may have all the candidates from either EM candidates, family medicine candidates, peds candidates, OB candidates. Everybody is kind of in one group. And then afterwards, you kind of split apart to your different programs. And I remember a couple of times when I had that, I would start to follow the peds group, and they're like, oh, ortho is that way, or oh, EM is that way. And I was like, no, I'm in peds. I'm in the right place. So I remember being out there. And the great thing about being a unicorn is you get noticed oh so well. And sometimes you get noticed for bad reasons, but also you get noticed for good reasons. And so I remember just going and just having such a great time, meeting so many different wonderful people. And I was torn between Nationwide, which would have satisfied my contract, as well as Children's Hospital Michigan, which was kind of like the epitome of what I wanted to be at the time.
Yeah.
So I had to make a tough decision. It was really tough, and my heart is with all of the candidates right now as they are getting ready to certify their rank lists. For those pre-meds who don't know, you have two applications that you kind of got to go through. The first one is kind of to apply to different residency programs. And the second one is to submit what we call a rank list that programs submit, medical students submit. And then you kind of match each other up to see if you are kind of like, it's almost like Valentine's Day. Do I like you? Check yes or no. Do you like me? Check yes or no. If we match, we match. And so I certified my list, and I had put Nationwide Children's as number 1 and Children's Hospital Michigan as number 2. And I got a chance to open up check my email that day and saw that I got my number 1 choice. So Nationwide Children's is where I went. When I was there, the interesting thing is that I was the third class to be part of the duly accredited program because it just recently had started at the time. And I was the first class where everything was done over at Nationwide Children's. Before me, the first 2 years, half of your time was spent at Doctor's Hospital, other half was spent at Nationwide. But my year, everything was done at Nationwide. And it was a cohort of 42 interns that I was in. 5 or 6 of us were DOs, 5 of us from the dual program, and 1 person who did just the categorical program, so the program that wasn't duly accredited. And I remember just kind of being in residency, and I know that my cohorts didn't mean anything negatively by it, but I kind of have a pause. We would be having a conversation about something. I'm like, oh, you could do osteopathic manipulative medicine for this. You can do OMM for this. And they were like, oh, yeah, that's right. I totally forgot you were a DO. And, some people were like, oh, yeah, great. Like, they didn't know I was a DO. But then I'm thinking to myself, like, well, I paid a lot of money to get this degree. Why am I not demonstrating to you that I was a DO? Because it's something that's setting me apart here, right? So that's when I definitely strive to make sure that I was incorporating more osteopathic principles and practice into my practice because I really wanted to, there's a DO difference and I still stand by that. And so that was something that it wasn't a negative connotation that some people may have assumed, like, that I have a barrier for being a DO. It was more so for me that I was like, let me make sure that you don't forget, because being a DO to me is just as important as me being Black. I'm so pro-Black, it makes your head spin. And it's who I am. It's part of my identity as well as being a DO. It's who I am. It's part of my identity. And even though it doesn't make up all of who I am, it definitely is a huge part of me. So I want to make sure that I am, that I'm expressing myself and I'm making myself known through my practice, through who I am. And not just with the OMM, but just with every way I practice.
It's the first time I've ever heard being a DO kind of described like that. That's awesome. So I'm glad you actually spoke about using OMM and kind of sticking to your osteopathic principles during your residency. Do you use that in your day-to-day practice? Not just the principles, but do you use manipulation in your practice? And also another question is when you were exiting residency and when you were close to being done, how were you and how did you go about looking for a job?
Oh, that's a great question. So to answer your first question, not only do I use OMM in my practice, I actually created in my residency program a OMM curriculum for my pediatric residents.
Really?
Not only for my osteopathic residents, but my allopathic residents go through that same curriculum. Everyone goes through it. Oh. So yes, and then we also, in conjunction with the Family Medicine Department at Morristown Medical Center, which also has an OMM NMM fellowship, we actually created a OMM clinic that we do once a month. We have I can't lie to you and say that this has been going on since COVID. COVID changed a little bit of things, so we haven't been able to do the clinic over the past couple of months, but we're starting back with it. But we have an OMM trained faculty member that will come with me, and we will actually have, or even the OMM fellows we would have come, because I can obviously supervise the OMM fellows, and be able to do OMM in clinic and have not only conversations about any patient that walk through that door, how would we treat that patient, whether it's a well child visit or if it's an ear infection or whatever have you, how can we treat that patient, just as we typically would treat a patient in pediatrics, but how can we also think about this from the OPP, OMM standpoint as well? So all of our residents go through that, including our MD residents. I actually teach I start off with doing a back to basics when you first come into residency. So that's the first lecture that you get because it's a lecture series. This allows for our osteopathic our osteopathic residents, to be able to get a background into OMM. And then, or just kind of like a refresher course, right? Because it's been a while since we all talked about TART and Friot's law and all those wonderful things.
Exactly.
Right. But then it also gives my MD residents understanding of like, what the heck are they talking about when they say TART, or what the heck are they talking about when they say somatic dysfunction? Like, this is it. This is what we're talking about. When we're talking about direct, this is what this means. And breaking it down and showing them like, yo, this is not just a hooey-fooey, like magical thing. This is actually basic biomedical sciences that we're putting into practice. So we do that. But going back into your second question, which is how did I find a job, or what was I looking for when I was finishing out? It was quite interesting. So I had some family issues. Both of my parents were ill at the time that I was finishing residency. I was asked to be chief resident. And so I was the second DO ever at Nationwide Children to be named as chief resident, or one of the chief residents rather. But I wound up having both of my parents becoming quite ill. My mom had another primary cancer. My father wound up having end-stage renal disease. So it was time for me to go out and start working, because if just one more thing would have happened, it would have financially devastated them. And I knew that I couldn't just sit still without being able to financially support them if they needed it. And so I wound up looking for positions. And it was not difficult at all for me to find a position, especially in primary care pediatrics, which I did. After I left that position, I was fortunate enough to be able to have my mentors that were back at Nationwide Children's who were like, hey, why don't you come back home when that job didn't work out as well? And when I came back, it was like, well, I know that you're really interested in weight management, and we're starting this new primary care obesity network, and we want you to be a part of it, and we want you to do kind of like this additional training work, which I was like, this is great. This is what I always wanted to do. And so I was able to do that, and that carried me throughout my career. So yeah, it just, thank God it worked out.
That's really awesome. I'm really sorry to hear about your parents, though. That's not something you want to go through during like the hardest time of your, career, residency and whatnot. I'm really sorry.
Yeah. We all have our challenges. We all have our struggles that we have to go through each and every day. And there is not going to always be sunshine and blue skies when we're going through this. But if anything, it allowed me to be able to have a better understanding and have more empathy for my patients as they're going through things as well.
You're so humble. You should just say that that's what made you the most amazing doctor, because you were an awesome physician. I'm proud to be a DO just listening to an advocate like you.
Oh
right
my
now.
gosh.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much. Seriously. That's like, I'm not even being facetious. It's really humbling to even hear you say that. Like, I don't take that for granted at all.
I don't say that to everyone too. So I mean it. But so yes, speaking about specialties and everything, kind of moving away from OMM, I would love to know, I guess I don't want to ask, are you happy with your specialty? But if you went back and did it all over again, would you have chose a different specialty?
No. And the reason why I tell you no is because I thought about that question when people ask me about it. I bring it up all the time. I know in my heart of hearts that I enjoy what I do. I probably would have did things a little bit differently in a sense of, would I have gone back and did that chief year? I would have probably thought about doing maybe some additional things in my career. Sure, I probably would have. But my specialty wise, I would have not changed, because I didn't really mesh with anything else. I enjoyed OB. I enjoyed family. I enjoyed even ENT when I got a chance to do it. I really enjoyed those things, but I didn't enjoy anything as much as I do with peds. And I just couldn't see myself. I could see myself in a different career, which is funny because the career that I would have saw myself as being probably would have been a teacher if I wasn't a pediatrician, but I'm a teacher anyway. So it's like I'm doing the same thing that I thought I would do.
I used to be a teacher, and you know what? I would never go back and do it again. But because I have so much respect for teachers. I taught high school, and it was tough. And I don't know how these teachers do it every day.
Yes.
But you really have to have a special heart. And for you to do pediatrics, I think the fact that you're saying that, you can't think of another specialty and you wouldn't have done it any other way means that you were made for this. And one last question, the question we ask all of our guests on the podcast is, if you had a piece of advice throughout your education, throughout your career when you were growing up that you always think of, what was it, and what would you say to students currently that are going through kind of like hard times and kind of not seeing that light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah. One piece of advice that stuck out to me that was the best advice ever was when I was in the summer scholars program, we had student teachers, and some of the students were our teachers. So I got a chance to be a student teacher. One of the student teachers said to me one time, and it was so true. He said, "You have to learn how to become comfortable being uncomfortable." And when he said that, I was like, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I didn't realize how powerful it would have been until later on at this point in time in my career. And I say that so many times. I'm sure my students and residents are like, "Oh my God, I'm so tired of you saying that, Dr. Winters, please stop." But it's so true. You have to learn how to become comfortable being uncomfortable. And there are going to be so many situations where you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be unsure about what to do. You're going to be unsure about what is going to happen next or what lies next. But learning how to be able to center yourself and to be able to say, like, what, no matter what comes, I'm going to be able to deal with this. I'm going to be able to do it. And that's the key part of it. And it guided me through so many different areas of my life. So that was definitely one piece of information that if I can leave with anyone, is just that we have a tendency to think that this life is supposed to be comfortable. And I'm not saying that to be like, "Oh, you don't know," or "You're too young to understand," or blah, 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 like, some of the old folks say. But literally, we have a tendency, we all do. We all think that if a situation that we go through is a little bit hard, I told you I went through post-bac program to be able to start medical school. If I was to say like, "Oh, well, if you're not going to let me in directly, then I'm not going to do this," I wouldn't be here. We're talking to you right now, right? Things are going to be challenges, and that's what's going to happen. And that's what's meant to be. It's so important, though, for us to be able to learn how to be able to say, like, what, not everything is going to always go the way that I want it to go, but it'll work out just how I need it to work out. And even if it doesn't seem like that at the moment, give it time. Keep on living. It will.
That is the perfect advice to end on. And with that, Dr. Winters, I really want to thank you for being on our podcast and sharing your wonderful, inspiring story. Again, I'm proud to be a DO, and I'm proud to have advocates like you to speak with us and kind of, promote osteopathy to pre-medical students.
Well, and I'm so happy that you are part of our profession. You continue to make us proud, and I just can't wait to see all of the great work that you're still going to do.
Thank you, Dr. Winters. And everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today. And please follow us on all our platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
This concludes our episode of Do or Do Not. Send all inquiries, comments, suggestions, and even let us know if there's someone you want us to interview to doordonotpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Do or Do Not Podcast for updates. If you enjoyed our podcast, please share it with your classmates and administration. We have plenty of more interviews lined up, and we're excited to share them with you. This is Tianyu Shea. Thank you guys so much for listening to Do or Do Not.